Hey everybody, John Hand with the Pulsing Cinema. I just got out of seeing Terminator Genisys, hence why the American optical aviators are shielding my sensitive eyes, my sensitive, tender, light-sensitive eyes. I saw the film kind of out of more of an obligation, because I've pretty much seen every Terminator film pretty much the opening day weekend, or definitely the opening day month. I think the opening day weekend. Ever since I saw Terminator 2, my mom took me to that at a train station. And then Terminator 3 in a little theater in Florida. Terminator Salvation in a little theater in Florida. And now here in a little Cinemark in Austin. I think it's a good film. I think it's a film that is a lot better than it should be. I definitely think it's being underrated, being marked off, when I think there is a really clever script at play. I think it's a lot more clever than maybe it will be given credit for, and maybe it's a little more clever than it should be. I mean, I think there's some really good writing, and I think there's 2 credited screenwriters, and I'm sure there's probably maybe a half dozen to a dozen uncredited ghostwriters who obviously have worked on this thing. But they've really crafted a story which feels like a successor to Terminator and Terminator 2. It really, watching this film and getting into it, makes you realize really how poor Terminator 3 and Terminator Salvation were. I mean, really how un-Terminator-like they were. How Terminator 3 and Terminator 4 were kind of they were decked out in the regalia of a Terminator, with Stan Winston's special effects and designs and more Terminators coming through the portal. Well, I guess not in Terminator Salvation, because it was kind of a sequel, prequel, nequel, whatever. But this guy feels like the real deal, and It's difficult for me to say that. It's hard for me to say that. I came in wanting to hate, wanting to not enjoy this film, but I really felt like I think James Cameron's comments on it recently, of course, I think they are politically motivated. Obviously, I think there is a very strategic political vibe behind his whole thing of like this film feels like Terminator 3, it feels like a successor. But at the same time, I think you can feel that the idea of this screenplay, which is updating, kind of rebooting or updating the idea of the apocalypse, the Skynet apocalypse, the Cyberdyne apocalypse, and putting it into the modern era of national surveillance, the prevalence of social media, and people with these little surveillance devices, carrying them around when I'm recording this on, little surveillance devices everywhere, and the idea of Skynet emerging from this as a consciousness, as a conscious AI, from all of this kind of surveillance stuff and the things that people are holding around. That's the whole idea of the film, of Terminator Genisys. That's the real main, kind of spine behind it. It's not just a film of, okay, there's another Terminator that comes through the time portal and all of that stuff. But the main spine of it is kind of an updating and bringing it into a modern era, which is something kind of very smart. Because they could have done it, like in Terminator 3 and Terminator 4, they could have done a rehash. Terminator 3 was in many ways a rehash of Terminator 2. When I first saw it, I thought, okay, that's good. Jonathan Mostow is a good director. He can direct stunts well, and there is that whole stunt on the tanker truck that's very impressive with lots of physical effects and big stuff. But at the end of the day, the movie, as far as plot, sucks, because the whole subtext of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 is that whole spine of, there's a very very socially conscious message about society and family and ecology, and there's all of that type of, the kind of, threads and stuff that are running through all of James Cameron's work. There is a real socially conscious component of James Cameron's work. There is the exterior of the machinery and the technology, but there also is that kind of message and that's kind of binding together. And I think also the performances of Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton really tie those films together. Linda Hamilton in Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, and I think Emilia Clarke, I don't think people are really giving her credit. I think she really does look like a very young Linda Hamilton, and she works this guy Jai Courtney Wright person. He's like the new Sam Worthington. He's again kind of another, like, it would have been neat if somehow Michael Biehn had been, somehow you could do a timey-wimey thing, Of course, there's new Terminators, and of course, to spoil that, because it's spoiled by everyone, John Connor has been turned into a Terminator. He's kind of like a liquid metal, but like nanite electromagnetic Terminator. So he's like this modern Terminator that's like out of some kind of Beats commercial, where he's all these made up of all these little things that can nanites and magnetic. He's like a magnetic polymer T1000, which is very kind of neat and cool, and something from a visual perspective works really well. And I found myself, oh, well, that's a nice. It's not like the what was it, Christina Loken? Let's just do another T1000. That was rather boring. I think, what was it, like a T1000, but it had some Terminator mechanic. It was boring. Schwarzenegger is in here because Schwarzenegger has to be in here, and he did pulls it off as the aging Terminator, the aging model, and there's a lot made of that. What else can I say? I mean, I think as far as the driving plot and the whole thing of Genisys, which is now what Skynet has become, the Skynet is, well, I mean, the whole idea of the film also is kind of this, the big, we're at Terminator 5, so by this point we've kind of gotten timey-wimey, whereas we're now in kind of an alternate timeline. We're in a multiverse where it's very difficult to explain to someone. Very difficult to explain to even the average movie critic, the idea of a multiverse, the idea of parallel timelines, the idea that at every moment in time there's how many millions of thousands of different permutations, and could be a possibility, instead of time being this kind of linear track, that these multiple parallel timelines for every different permutation of every different decision can exist in parallel. There is this strain of commentary in the film reviews for Terminator Genisys. Oh, this means that the events in Terminator 1 and 2 didn't happen. And you just kind of like, no, it means that the events in Terminator 1 and 2 did happen. This is also happening at the same time. This is a parallel universe, as the John Connor character says in this film. He feels like he can kill Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese. He feels like he's stranded in a little time cul-de-sac. He's out on his own. But again, explaining the idea of a parallel universe and parallel timelines, parallel universes, multiverses, there was stuff. Again, it's the whole thing of the Terminator, the Star Trek 2009 reboot of just like, if something's giving you a problem, just do something else. Just forget about it. Just revise it. Revive it. And it's a lazy modern screenwriting technique, and it's the newest fad. But at the same time, it's in some ways a hell of a lot more modern and inventive than what Terminator Salvation did. And I hated the T-800s in Terminator Salvation, where, you know, the T-800. I mean, you look at what Schwarzenegger's Terminator does at the beginning of the Terminator 1 with those punks. You know, I mean, he literally, as soon as the Terminator gets his hands on you, you're dead. You know, you're just like, he just runs his fucking fist through yours. And then, but the T-800s in fucking Terminator Salvation, they would just like throw people around like a punching bag. Like they would have people in their death grip and then just throw them across the room or throw them across the helicopter. It's like, what the fuck? Why did he do that? You know, that was a horrible Terminator film. Everybody in that film should be embarrassed. That was a real like, from the standpoint of the look of it, and it was, you know, Stan Winston's last film, and it looked interesting and cool, and it had, again, you know, the cliffhanger of, because there was going to be like the whole John Carpenter, you know, post-apocalyptic Terminator trilogy or quadrilogy of what's Skynet doing there, and they're doing some weird cyborg shit at the end of the film. I don't think we'll ever know, but in this film, kind of sets up a lot of mysteries, because it was, as we learn in Terminator Genisys, there seems to be these time displacement portals, or the funny name that James Cameron gave these things. There's James Cameron terminology all over this film. You know, of course, you know, Kyle Reese, you know, gives his name and rank, you know, and there's echoes to the Terminator 1 and 2 scenes, but it's just done in such an earnest and fresh way that it just seems like it works. It just seems like a guy is like, let's just embrace it, man. Let's just fuck it, you know. Let's not try to invent some more crap, you know. Let's go back to basics. Let's do it. And yeah, I mean, it is kind of like a fast food term. It almost in some ways feels like an adaptation of like a really faithful Dark Horse comic book from the Terminator. It's almost like it took a Dark Horse comic where it's like really really heavily researched and authentic, with lots of James Cameron dialogue, or James Cameron-esque dialogue, with lots of James Cameron-esque plot twists, and it's definitely like a James Cameron-esque like takeoff, like we're doing James Cameron, and then just take that comic book and then do a film out of it. I mean, it really feels faithful and authentic to the mythos in a way that T3 and T4 was only giving like lip service to, you know. There's just something that authentic it feels, and there is the overload of the CGI. I thought the whole idea of these like spider things that they throw off the ships and they tumble and all that shit, I thought that was pretty stupid, and maybe it might be a nice 3D eye pop for somebody, but I didn't watch it. I didn't torture myself. I didn't watch this film in 3D. But there was so much good, so many little character moments, and the little twists of, like, we're in a new time, we're taking, you know, the little twists and stuff, which were, again, part of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, and yet were tried to be mimicked in Terminator 3 and Terminator 4, but just where McGee and Mostow and their armies of screenwriters failed. Somehow they really, you know, buckled down on this film, and they're like, man, we gotta do something the fans dig, and I think they've done it, and I think it's really, 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 really cool. I think I'm gonna stop babbling right now, but I think Terminator Genisys, it's kind of meant to be a second-tier film that doesn't need to rock the world. It needs to make a return on investment. And I think it will. I think it is a good film. I think it just by itself, as what it is, as Terminator fast food, as just something to keep the lights on in the Terminator franchise, I think it is a worthy addition to the canon. A hell of a lot more worthier than T3, and a hell of a lot more worthier than Terminator Salvation.